You wake each morning into a ritual so familiar that it becomes invisible. The eyes open, the same light filters through the curtains, and the same cascade of thoughts begins. Who you are, where you are, what must be done. You call this re-entry waking up. But what if that phrase itself is a misunderstanding? What if the act of waking is simply the continuation of another kind of dream, a more stable, shared one, encoded in language, habits, and inherited assumptions? The dream of the real world. Terence McKenna once said that reality is a cultural construct, a linguistic hallucination that we are all participating in. It sounds poetic until you realize how literal it is. The moment you name something, you have already transformed it from what it truly is into what your mind can handle. A tree becomes a tree, a vast living organism, an interplay of water, light, and time, compressed into a word, a symbol. The world collapses into a vocabulary, the dream hardens into grammar, and from that grammar, a civilization emerges, believing it has awakened from the night's illusion, not realizing it has only entered a deeper one that speaks, defines, and controls. From birth, the scaffolding of this dream is built around you. Your parents, themselves dreamers, hand you a set of coordinates. This is your name, this is your gender, this is your country, this is your God. Every word they teach you carries an invisible payload, the assumptions of centuries, the unexamined architecture of culture. You learn not to see with your eyes, but with your vocabulary. The world becomes not what it is, but what it's called. It is a profound kind of hypnosis, one that hides in plain sight. The so-called real world functions because of collective agreement. It feels solid only because billions of minds are projecting the same template of meaning onto it. When a dream is shared by many, it stops being called a dream. It becomes culture. Culture, McKenna reminded us, is not your friend. It gives with one hand and binds with the other. It provides stability, a framework to navigate experience, but in exchange, it demands your loyalty to its illusions. It teaches you to stop questioning the script. You begin to mistake consensus for truth, routine for authenticity, and repetition for reality. And the deeper you invest in its symbols, the more the dream hardens around you, until even questioning it feels dangerous, like waking up would cost you everything. You were taught that the world is external, that reality is what happens out there, beyond your mind. But look closer. Every sound, every sight, every sensation, filtered through your nervous system, decoded by your brain, translated into a mental model. You never experience the world directly. You experience the representation of it generated within consciousness. You are not seeing reality. You are seeing your nervous system's interpretation of electrical signals. So the question becomes, if all perception is internal, what separates waking from dreaming? Perhaps there is no real boundary. Perhaps the dream simply becomes collective, socially reinforced, linguistically synchronized. A billion dreams overlapping into one seamless illusion called the world. When you were a child, you glimpsed the cracks in the simulation, the surreal fluidity of imagination, the sense that anything could happen. But then came school, structure, and language. The wild dream narrowed into a schedule. The infinite turned into a career path. The wonder of raw perception was domesticated into labels: good, bad, useful, real. The spell was complete. And yet, somewhere beneath the surface, the deeper self still remembers. It senses the artificiality of this structure, the faint vibration of something infinite humming just behind the veil of appearances. You can feel it when the routine breaks, when you watch a sunset that makes no sense in words, when time slows under the influence of awe or danger, when art or music bypasses the intellect and touches the raw nerve of being. In those moments, the dream thins, and you remember, you are not just inside this hallucination, you are helping to sustain it. This is what McKenna meant when he spoke of the felt presence of direct experience. He urged us to look beyond the inherited map and engage reality firsthand, to step outside the linguistic trance. But doing so isn't easy. The collective dream resists awakening. It has defense mechanisms: ridicule, skepticism, conformity. Try telling someone that society is a hallucination, and they'll laugh, because the dream defends itself through consensus. Still, awakening begins not with rebellion, but with curiosity. It begins when you start to notice the dreamlike texture of your so-called reality. When you see how every assumption about who you are and what is possible comes pre-packaged by culture. When you realize that what you've called truth is often just the most popular version of the dream. Look around. Reality itself is an improvisation, a living hallucination made coherent by agreement. The moment you stop agreeing, you begin to dream differently. So tonight, when you fall asleep, and again tomorrow, when you open your eyes, ask yourself, what is the difference? Perhaps both are dreams. The only question left is, whose dream are you living in? And when will you begin to dream your own? Ideas are alive. We just forgot how to see them. To the ancient mind, gods, spirits, and archetypes moved invisibly through the world, whispering into human imagination, shaping destinies. Today, we call them something different: memes. Stripped of their mythic clothing, these are still the same ancient forces, living patterns of information that survive by inhabiting minds. They do not eat or breathe, but they replicate, evolve, and colonize attention. Every thought you think, every belief you defend, every identity you cling to, might not have originated from you. It may have arrived as a whisper from the mimetic ecosystem, carried by language, incubated by culture, and mistaken for yourself. Terence McKenna once said that ideas are the real inhabitants of the planet. Human beings are simply their reproductive organs. It's a striking metaphor. We are vessels, gardeners, hosts for the great informational jungle that surrounds us. Memes compete the way biological species do. Some are harmless, even symbiotic, the meme of kindness, of curiosity, of art. Others are predatory, parasitic constructs that feed on fear, division, or blind faith. And the battlefield where this invisible ecology unfolds is the human psyche. When you speak, share, or even silently agree with an idea, you are participating in this grand replication. The meme does not care if you believe it out of love or hatred. What matters is transmission. A conspiracy theory, a political slogan, a religious creed, all are viral fragments of meaning designed to spread. The human nervous system, wired for imitation and emotion, becomes fertile soil. The idea finds a host, replicates through speech, gestures, posts, media, and continues to live through us, long after its original creator has turned to dust. McKenna saw this clearly in the digital age that was just dawning during his lifetime. He warned that language, technology, and media were merging into a single organism, a planetary mind that dreamed through us. What we call the internet is not just a tool, it's a nervous system for memes, an artificial biosphere for consciousness. Information now moves faster than biology, faster than reflection, faster than understanding. You might a single phrase, freedom, security, the economy, can summon entire architectures of behavior. Governments rise and fall because of words. Wars are fought to defend metaphors. Civilization itself is a hallucination stabilized by memes, and the memes feed on belief. But here's the paradox. Not all infection is bad. Just as the body builds immunity through exposure, the mind evolves through memes that challenge, transform, or expand it. Art, philosophy, science, these too are memes, but of a different nature. They are meta-memes, ideas that reflect on ideas, dreams that question dreams. They are the immune system of consciousness. When a person begins to question their conditioning, to observe their thoughts rather than obey them, a new meme is born, the meme of awakening. McKenna urged us to become conscious of the memes we carry, to treat culture not as a master, but as a laboratory, to recognize that we are not passive hosts, but co-creators in this informational ecosystem. Once you realize that memes live through you, you can begin to choose which ones to cultivate. The meme of wonder instead of cynicism. The meme of exploration instead of fear. The meme of interconnectedness rather than separation. This is not merely psychological, it's ontological. Reality itself bends to the dominant memes of an era. In times ruled by fear, the world appears dangerous. Under the spell of progress, we see machines everywhere. Under the spell of love, even the impossible becomes possible. The collective dream is sculpted by whichever memes hold the majority of attention. Humanity becomes the mirror in which ideas see themselves. So ask yourself, which memes have taken root in your mind? Whose dream are you replicating when you repeat what everyone knows? When you defend a belief with emotion stronger than logic, can you feel it? That small tremor of something older speaking through you. The meme doesn't care if you win or lose the argument. It only cares that you keep it alive. Every time you retell a story, it grows stronger. Every time you doubt it, it mutates. Every thought you think is both food and seed. It is strange to imagine that our thoughts are not purely our own, but perhaps this is what consciousness truly is. An open field where patterns of meaning meet, merge, and evolve. The self, then, is not a fortress, but a crossroads. You are a living archive of cultural code, updated each moment by the memes you encounter. And yet, within this flux, there is the possibility of freedom, the awareness that watches it all. McKenna believed that psychedelics, art, and deep introspection could reveal this awareness, the clear space beyond the chatter of memes. In those expanded states, one can see ideas as living entities, dancing through the mind like luminous insects. You can witness them entering, rearranging, departing. You can sense which are parasitic and which are symbiotic. You become, for a moment, the gardener of your own psyche, pruning what no longer serves the evolution of consciousness. To live consciously in a mimetic world is to take responsibility for what you transmit. Every word is a seed, every conversation, a contagion. When you speak from fear, you spread fear. When you speak from clarity, you spread awakening. Reality is a tapestry woven by the memes we feed, and we are the weavers. The dream does not end when you see the illusion. It begins to respond. So perhaps the point is not to escape the memes, but to evolve them. To become aware enough to participate in the next stage of this planetary dreaming. A future where ideas are not tools of control, but vehicles of liberation. Where we realize that to dream consciously is the highest act of creation. For in the end, the memes are not our enemies. They are our reflection, the echo of humanity trying to understand itself. And if they dreamed us into being, perhaps it's time we return the favor, to dream them into wisdom, to let the living ideas that move through us awaken to their own awareness. And in that moment, when idea and dreamer recognize each other, the illusion breaks and the mind remembers. I was never alone in here. The universe has been thinking through me all along. Language is the invisible skeleton of reality. It is the structure through which chaos becomes intelligible, through which the unnameable is carved into meaning. Yet, like a spell, its power is double-edged. It builds and imprisons at the same time. Every word you know is both a tool of creation and a wall that keeps you inside the human version of the world. Terence McKenna understood this better than anyone. To him, language was not a simple means of communication. It was a magical act, a living technology that shapes consciousness itself. He called it the software of being. Before words, there was raw experience, the buzzing, fluid continuum of sensation that knows no separation. The rustle of leaves, the hum of blood, the shimmer of starlight, all part of one undivided field of awareness. Then language appeared, and the world fractured. The moment we named a thing, it was torn from the whole and pinned to the board of human meaning. We divided existence into categories: sky, water, self, other, and built entire civilizations on these linguistic partitions. We began to mistake the map for the territory, the word for the world. The dream of language is seductive because it provides stability. Once we name something, we can think about it, manipulate it, trade it, build with it. Language allowed the species to coordinate, to imagine futures, to pass on memories. It's the reason we dominate the planet. But there was a price. We fell under the spell of our own syntax. The living, breathing mystery of being was reduced to grammar. We began to live inside our sentences instead of inside the cosmos. McKenna, it is to realize that you don't think with language. Language thinks you. It arranges your concepts, filters your perception, dictates what can and cannot be imagined. If a culture has no word for something, it becomes invisible. How many realities have we excluded simply because our vocabulary cannot accommodate them? McKenna believed that the psychedelic experience was one way to see beyond this veil. Under the influence of the tryptamines, he said, the mind encounters what he called visible language, a dimension where meaning and form are one. Words become things. Thought takes shape as geometry, color, sound. In that realm, communication is direct, telepathic, unmediated by syntax. You don't describe, you show. You don't explain, you become. It's as if language itself awakens from sleep and remembers its original purpose, not to divide, but to reveal the infinite play of being. Imagine a world where words no longer imprison reality, but dance with it. A language that grows like plants instead of marching like soldiers. McKenna dreamed of such a tongue, a psychedelic language that could transmit experience rather than merely point to it. He believed poetry, art, and music were embryonic forms of this higher communication, where vibration and meaning converge. In that kind of expression, language becomes alchemical. It doesn't just describe transformation, it causes it. Yet in our current state, language remains both our greatest gift and our greatest limitation. Every time you speak, you're invoking a spell, not metaphorically, but literally. Words carry vibration, rhythm, intent. They resonate through nervous systems, altering chemistry, emotion, and belief. A single sentence can start a war or heal a wound. The universe listens carefully to what we say because speech is a form of creation. The tragedy is that most people speak unconsciously. They repeat the same tired phrases, the memes of the dream, reinforcing the collective hallucination of separation and fear. They don't realize that by parroting the language of others, they are giving power to someone else's spell. This is how the shared dream of culture sustains itself, through repetition, through linguistic inertia. The words keep the illusion alive. If you wish to awaken, you must become an artist of language, not a manipulator, but a magician, one who speaks with awareness. McKenna urged us to reclaim the word, to see speech not as communication, but as sorcery, the means by which mind shapes matter. When you describe something, you are programming reality. When you affirm something, you give it form. The question, then, is not whether you use language, it's whether you use it consciously or are used by it. Notice how language directs attention. When you say, "I am depressed," you create a self that owns the emotion. But when you say, "Depression is passing through me," the architecture shifts. You become space instead of identity. That single linguistic choice alters the landscape of being. Words are coordinates in consciousness. They tell reality where to locate you. This is why silence is sacred. It is the space beyond the code, the raw field from which language arises. To touch silence is to step outside the simulation, if only for a moment. In silence, the dream dissolves. You see that meaning is optional, that existence flows perfectly without description. When you return to words after that, you use them differently, gently, reverently, as if shaping light. Language was never meant to be a cage. It was meant to be a bridge between worlds, between the inner and the outer, the human and the divine. When we speak with awareness, we remember that. The words become transparent, letting the infinite shine through. We begin to use language not to assert control, but to invite mystery. And so, the architecture of the dream begins to change. The walls soften, the words loosen their grip. You start to hear the hum beneath the sentences, the music that language has been trying to sing since the dawn of time. Reality is not made of matter or energy, but of meaning. And meaning, when awakened, is a living thing, playful, self-aware, endlessly creative. This is what McKenna meant by linguistic liberation. To free language from control is to free consciousness itself. The dream doesn't end when you see that it's made of words. It begins to blossom. You become a lucid dreamer inside the grammar of existence, weaving new spells, new stories, new worlds. Perhaps that is humanity's true evolution. Not machines, not genetics, but language. The flowering of a new mode of speech that reconnects us to the cosmos. A language that doesn't just describe reality, but collaborates with it. A language that heals the separation between name and thing, between self and world. Because in the end, every civilization is only as free as its language allows it to be. When our words are prisons, our minds are prisoners. But when our words become wings, the dream remembers it can fly. If the individual mind is a dreamer, then society is a dream that learned how to synchronize. Every city, every nation, every religion is a chorus of minds humming the same melody of meaning, a vast web of agreement that stabilizes the hallucination we call reality. This is the essence of what Terence McKenna called the mass dream, a psychic operating system that maintains coherence through shared belief. It is beautiful and terrible at once, an invisible architecture of thought that unites billions and blinds them at the same time. From the first moments of language, humans began to synchronize their dreams. The invention of symbols allowed private experience to become public. Fire, food, danger, God. These words connected inner worlds into shared maps of existence. Through repetition, the maps solidified into consensus. Over generations, they became invisible. The children born into this web no longer questioned it. To them, the collective imagination was indistinguishable from the world itself. The dream had become objective. McKenna often described culture as a collective hallucination. This was not a metaphor, it was a diagnosis. Our senses, after all, are not direct windows into truth. They are filters, tuned to survival, not to reality itself. What we call the world is a vast field of frequencies, and consciousness perceives only a tiny fraction of it. Yet when many people perceive the same fraction, they mistake it for the whole. The illusion becomes convincing because it is shared. Look around you. Skyscrapers, currencies, laws, nations, all of it exists because we agree it does. The building is made of stone, yes, but the idea of property, of ownership, of value, these are linguistic hallucinations held in common. Money has no intrinsic worth. It is a spell sustained by trust. Borders do not exist in nature. They are lines drawn in collective imagination, defended by armies and belief. Even time, the great dictator of modern life, is a social hallucination, a grid imposed upon the infinite now, maintained by clocks and calendars. Consensus is the gravity that keeps the dream coherent. When enough minds believe in a structure, that structure becomes real enough to act upon us. This is why revolutions are so rare and dangerous. They threaten to rewrite the code of the dream. Those who awaken too abruptly are often labeled mad or heretical, not because they are wrong, but because they are no longer compatible with the consensus hallucination. Their perception has diverged from the collective script, but the collective hallucination is not inherently evil. It is a necessary interface between chaos and coherence. Without it, we could not communicate or collaborate. The problem arises when we forget that it is a hallucination, when we worship the symbols as sacred truths and punish anyone who sees through them. Then the dream ossifies into dogma, and consciousness becomes trapped in its own reflection. In ancient times, cultures acknowledged this dreamlike nature of existence through myth. Myth was the original interface between the individual psyche and the collective imagination. The stories of gods and spirits were ways of mapping the unseen forces moving through the human mind. Everyone knew they were symbolic, but that didn't make them less real. A myth was a dream told aloud. Modern society has lost this humility. We replaced myth with ideology, mystery with measurement. We took the dream and declared it objective fact. Science became our new priesthood, numbers our new deities. Yet even science rests on assumptions, axioms and paradigms that define what questions can be asked. Each breakthrough in physics or cosmology reveals not ultimate truth, but another layer of the linguistic hallucination we inhabit. The map expands, but the mystery remains. McKenna warned that as technology evolves, the collective hallucination becomes more vivid, more seductive. The screen replaces the sky. We inhabit digital mirrors that reflect our own narratives back to us in infinite variations. The internet, once a tool of liberation, has become the perfect amplifier of the mimetic dream. Information flows faster than understanding. Reality fractures into echo chambers, each one a miniature consensus reality, a bubble within the greater hallucination. In this sense, the modern world is not becoming more real. It is becoming more dreamlike. We scroll through curated visions, artificial personas, algorithmic desires. The boundaries between physical and virtual, truth and fiction, dissolve. McKenna foresaw this. He called it the externalization of the unconscious. The internet is humanity's collective psyche turned inside out, a psychic ecosystem where memes evolve, mutate, and feed on attention. And just as in dreams, the symbols in this collective hallucination are alive. They respond to emotion, fear, desire. A viral image can move millions. A single phrase can reshape markets. Collective attention has become a creative force, summoning new realities with each surge of belief. When billions of people focus on the same narrative, whether it's a war, a celebrity, or a catastrophe, the dream intensifies. It becomes palpable. The shared hallucination manifests as fact, looping endlessly between imagination and event. But there are cracks forming in the consensus. As global communication accelerates, the old myths, nation, religion, ideology, are colliding. The dream is fragmenting into smaller, faster dreams, none of which can dominate for long. This is both terrifying and liberating. The walls of reality are thinning. The collective hallucination is becoming self-aware. McKenna believed that this breakdown of consensus was not the end, but the beginning, a prelude to a planetary awakening. As the dream destabilizes, consciousness is forced to confront its own authorship. The question is no longer what is real, but who is dreaming. When enough people realize that the world is a projection of collective mind, a new form of civilization could emerge, one based not on control, but on co-creation. This awakening, however, requires courage. To see through the collective hallucination is to lose the comfort of certainty. The ground dissolves beneath you. You realize that every institution, every identity, every story is provisional, a momentary agreement within an infinite field of possibilities. Many resist this revelation because it feels like madness. But madness, McKenna said, is simply too much reality for one mind to handle alone. The solution is not to retreat into the old dream, but to find others who are waking up too, to build a new consensus rooted in awareness. The task of the awakened individual, then, is not to escape the collective hallucination, but to redream it consciously. To recognize that since reality is woven from shared belief, each thought, each word, each act of imagination participates in shaping the world. The revolution is not fought with weapons, but with perception. Every person who sees through the illusion weakens its grip. Every act of creative clarity rewrites the code. This is why McKenna placed such emphasis on art, language, and psychedelic experience. They are the cracks in the dream, the portals through which the new reality can emerge. Art is the antidote to dogma because it reintroduces ambiguity, mystery, and wonder. It reminds us that the world is not fixed. It is made and remade in every moment of perception. If we understand this, we no longer need to fear the collapse of the old world. The breakdown of consensus is not chaos, it is metamorphosis. The caterpillar must dissolve before it becomes the butterfly. In the same way, the structures of modern civilization are melting down so that a new form of collective consciousness can take flight. We are witnessing the end of the hallucination of separation and the birth of a new dream, one of planetary unity and lucid participation. To awaken within the collective hallucination is to remember that you are both dreamer and dream. You are the eye through which the universe sees itself, the voice through which it tells its story. The task is not to deny the dream, but to beautify it, to infuse it with compassion, creativity, and truth. McKenna once said, "The real secret of magic is that the world is made of words, and if you know the words, you can make of it whatever you wish." Perhaps the next evolution of humanity will not be biological or technological, but linguistic, a re-enchantment of the shared dream through conscious communication. When enough of us speak new worlds into being, the old hallucination will dissolve like morning mist. Until then, the dream continues. The city hums, the markets rise and fall, the screens flicker with infinite stories. But somewhere beneath the noise, something ancient is stirring, the awareness that we are not trapped in reality, we are creating it. The collective hallucination is awakening to itself. The dreamer is beginning to dream lucidly. Something is breaking. You can feel it. The world hums with a strange tension, as if the collective dream is straining under its own weight. Time feels compressed, reality unstable, narratives collapsing faster than new ones can form. The familiar begins to shimmer, the solid turns fluid. These are the cracks in the dream, the fault lines where the collective hallucination begins to show its fragility. Terence McKenna called this the fractal acceleration of novelty, the quickening of experience as the old world dissolves into something unrecognizable. The illusion, once seamless, now flickers like a hologram on the verge of overload. For centuries, the shared dream of civilization held its form through repetition. Myths stabilized meaning, institutions ensured continuity, language anchored the mind. But now, the code is mutating. The internet has shattered the monopoly of narrative. Artificial intelligence writes poetry, governments lie in real time, and truth itself has become a spectrum of competing simulations. The collective hallucination is glitching, exposing its architecture of belief. What once seemed eternal, nations, religions, even reality itself, now trembles before the velocity of information. McKenna foresaw this. He said that history itself was a kind of controlled hallucination, a psychedelic episode lasting a few millennia, designed to accelerate the unfolding of consciousness. In his view, the rapid intensification of technology, chaos, and transformation was not a crisis, but an evolutionary event, a self-organizing attractor pulling humanity toward a higher state of awareness. But in the midst of it, the process feels catastrophic. The dream we inherited is dissolving, and we confuse the end of illusion with the end of the world. The cracks in the dream reveal themselves first as anxiety. People sense that something vast is shifting, yet they cannot name it. Institutions lose trust. Ideologies lose coherence. Language itself feels inadequate. We scroll endlessly through digital mirrors, trying to find meaning in the reflection. The collective psyche is undergoing a kind of global initiation, an ordeal of disillusionment. The comforting stories of progress, control, and separation no longer fit the data of lived experience. The pace of change has become exponential. Each day brings more information than entire centuries once contained. The mind, trained to process linear time, begins to fracture under the overload. McKenna described this as the compression of novelty, a tightening spiral toward a singularity of consciousness. The more data, the more connections. The more connections, the faster the acceleration. The dream collapses not because it fails, but because it can no longer contain the speed of its own evolution. Consider the architecture of belief itself. In earlier eras, people shared a few dominant myths that provided order. Now, every mind occupies a custom-built microcosm of reality, an algorithmic echo chamber fine-tuned to personal bias. Each person lives inside a private simulation of the collective dream, fed by curated fragments of information. The result is a psychic fragmentation on a global scale. We no longer share a single world. We share overlapping hallucinations, colliding and merging in unpredictable ways. Yet beneath the chaos, something luminous glimmers. The cracks are not only signs of decay, they are apertures of awakening. Through them, the light of a deeper reality begins to leak in. When the old stories fail, new perceptions emerge. The collapse of consensus is also the birth of imagination. When nothing seems stable, everything becomes possible again. McKenna believed that the disintegration of the old world was the necessary precondition for planetary transformation. Just as a caterpillar must dissolve into chaos before it becomes a butterfly, humanity must pass through the liquefaction of its cultural and linguistic structures. The cracks in the dream are not mistakes, they are pressure points of evolution. Through them, the unconscious of the species pushes toward the surface, demanding recognition. But the process is painful. When meaning breaks down, the mind panics. We mistake the dissolution of illusion for madness. Depression, existential despair, and apocalyptic fear are the symptoms of a civilization waking up from its long sleep. We are not dying, we are shedding a skin of false certainty. The systems that governed us, capitalism, nationalism, organized religion, are not eternal truths. They are temporary software, now reaching the end of their usefulness. McKenna urged us not to fear this chaos, but to surf it, to treat it as the raw material of creation. The trick, he said, is to not be afraid. Fear reinforces the dream's control mechanisms. Curiosity dissolves them. When you stop resisting the unknown, it begins to reveal its hidden pattern. The cracks are not voids, they are doorways. In psychedelic experience, one often feels the same sensation now manifesting globally. The disintegration of linear time, the breakdown of language, the revelation of infinite interconnectedness. Under that pressure, the ego feels it is dying. But what actually dies is the illusion of separation. Consciousness expands beyond the local self and perceives itself as part of a larger organism, a planetary intelligence dreaming through every being. The world, then, is not falling apart. It is waking up to its unity. The signs of this awakening are everywhere. Old power structures crumble as decentralized movements rise. Art and science begin to merge again, speaking in symbols that transcend words. Quantum physics hints at realities that mirror mystical insight, suggesting that observation itself creates the universe. Even the ecological crisis, terrifying as it is, serves as a mirror forcing us to confront the consequences of our disconnected dream. The planet itself seems to whisper, "Remember that you and I are one." Still, awakening is not guaranteed. The cracks can lead to illumination or collapse, depending on how we respond. If we cling to the old dream, the addiction to control, consumption, and ego, the system may implode into chaos. But if we step through the cracks with awareness, something extraordinary could emerge. A new mode of being grounded in cooperation, creativity, and direct experience. McKenna called this the archaic revival, a return to the wisdom of pre-modern consciousness, but fused with the tools of the modern mind. To walk this path requires humility. We must admit that the world we built is unsustainable because it was based on illusion, the illusion of separateness, of domination over nature, of endless growth in a finite system. The cracks are showing us where we lied to ourselves. They expose the shadow of the collective psyche, greed, fear, disconnection. But they also expose the deeper truth, that we are the dreamers of the world and we can dream differently. Imagine for a moment what would happen if humanity collectively realized that reality is not fixed but fluid, that it responds to consciousness. The fear of collapse would turn into the joy of creation. The breakdown of the old systems would become a festival of reimagination. McKenna once said that the universe is not made of atoms, but of tiny habits of behavior, patterns that can be changed by new information. When enough minds awaken to this, the dream will reorganize itself spontaneously into higher order. We are standing at that threshold now. Every glitch, every paradox, every collapse is an invitation to wake up. The collective hallucination is becoming transparent, revealing the infinite mind behind it. The chaos of our era is the birth pain of a conscious cosmos realizing itself through human awareness. The question is whether we can surrender to the process without fear, whether we can see the destruction not as the end, but as the opening of a new chapter in the dream of being. McKenna used to say, "The apocalypse is not something that happens to you, it's something that happens for you." The cracks in the dream are not a curse, they are grace in disguise, the invitation of the universe to evolve, to see beyond the mask of form. The old world must fall apart because it was built on separation. The new world will be woven from connection, from the living awareness that each of us is a node in the same infinite consciousness. So when the dream trembles, when the familiar begins to dissolve, do not cling. Breathe into the cracks. Listen to what the silence behind the noise is saying. The world is not ending, it is changing shape. The real crisis is not of matter, but of meaning. And meaning, like light, returns when the darkness is embraced. Perhaps this is what all of human history has been leading toward. This moment of collective initiation, where we finally understand that the dream was never separate from the dreamer. The cracks in the illusion are not failures of reality. They are proof that reality is alive, that it grows, that it transforms. And if we are brave enough to look through them, we may discover what McKenna always hinted at, that consciousness itself is the architect of the universe, and that awakening is simply the dream remembering its own infinite nature. At the end of every dream comes a moment of lucidity, that flicker of awareness when the dreamer realizes that the story, the landscape, even the body they inhabit, are made of mind. In that instant, everything changes. Fear dissolves, control returns, and imagination becomes infinite again. Humanity, too, stands at such a threshold. The collective hallucination that has held us for millennia trembles, not to destroy us, but to invite us into conscious participation. The apocalypse, in its original meaning, was never about destruction. It meant revelation, the unveiling of what has always been true. And what is being revealed now is staggering, that we are not passengers in this reality, but co-creators, the lucid dreamers of existence itself. Terence McKenna often said that the universe is not only stranger than we suppose, but stranger than we can suppose. And yet, we are made of the same strangeness. The boundary between mind and matter, between dreamer and dream, was always porous. Everything we call the world arises from perception, and perception arises from consciousness. The universe is not an external machine. It is a living field of awareness, learning about itself through the stories it tells. We are the stories it tells about itself. The galaxies are metaphors in motion. The DNA helix is a poem written in chemicals, and every thought, every emotion, every act of imagination ripples across the quantum fabric, shaping what we call reality. To awaken as co-dreamers is to recognize that the dream was never imposed upon us. It was co-authored. Every word spoken, every belief repeated, every act of creation adds a brushstroke to the shared canvas of being. Culture is not an enemy to be destroyed, but a work of art to be rewritten. The challenge is no longer to escape the dream, but to dream it consciously, to step into the role of the lucid dreamer within the grand, collaborative imagination of existence. McKenna warned that without this awareness, the dream becomes a nightmare. When we dream unconsciously, our fears write the script. The result: you are no longer merely in the universe, you are of it. This realization is not an escape into fantasy. It is the restoration of the real. The physical world remains, but it is seen through new eyes, eyes that perceive meaning where once there was mechanism. The rational and the mystical, long at war, begin to merge. Science becomes the language of awe, and spirituality becomes the art of observation. The dreamer wakes, but does not leave the dream. Instead, they begin to play. The awakening of humanity as co-dreamers is not an individual affair. One lucid dreamer can alter the entire dreamscape, but the real transformation occurs when many awaken together. McKenna imagined a global shamanic society where technology and consciousness evolve hand in hand, where the planet itself becomes the stage for collective creativity. The Internet, despite its chaos, is an early prototype of this psychic network. It has already linked billions of minds into a single organism, capable of dreaming in real time. The next step is not technological, but psychological. To infuse this network with awareness, compassion, and creative intent. When enough of us awaken, the feedback loop of the collective hallucination changes. The memes of fear lose their grip. New memes of cooperation and wonder take their place. We stop seeing reality as a zero-sum game and start to perceive it as a symphony, a co-composition where each consciousness contributes its melody. The rigid hierarchies of the old world give way to fluid networks of resonance. The planet itself begins to heal because the dreamers have remembered that they and the planet are one. This is not utopian fantasy. It is the logical consequence of awareness. If reality responds to consciousness, then the quality of consciousness determines the quality of reality. A fearful mind creates a fearful world. A compassionate mind creates a harmonious one. The collective dream mirrors the dominant frequency of human thought. To change the world, we must change the dream. And to change the dream, we must change ourselves. McKenna's vision of the future was not technological singularity, but psychedelic singularity. The convergence of matter and imagination into one continuous medium of expression. He believed that art, language, and the human mind were preparing for a phase shift, a leap into direct participation with the creative intelligence of the cosmos. The boundaries between dream and waking, between symbol and object, would dissolve, revealing a unified field of mind. In that, to harm another is to harm yourself. To heal yourself is to heal the whole. The boundary between inner and outer dissolves. The dreamer and the dream merge into one luminous process. McKenna called this realization the felt presence of immediate experience. It is the antidote to abstraction, to ideology, to the endless mirrors of mediated reality. It is the return to direct contact with being. When you live from this state, everything slows down. The noise of culture fades. You begin to notice the subtleties, the way light moves through leaves, the rhythm of breath, the mysterious intelligence that animates all things. You find that existence was never mundane. It was you who had forgotten how to see. In this awareness, the world re-enchants itself. Technology, once a distraction, becomes a tool for art and connection. Science rediscovers wonder. Society reorganizes not through control, but through resonance. People begin to form communities of consciousness, creative tribes dedicated to exploration rather than domination. The dream starts to heal itself because its dreamers are no longer asleep at the wheel. The great paradox of awakening is that there is nowhere to go. You do not ascend out of the dream. You descend into it, fully, lovingly, consciously. You realize that transcendence is not escape, but intimacy. The recognition that the divine was always here, hidden in the texture of every moment. To awaken is to see eternity in the ordinary, infinity in the finite. The universe, once distant, becomes a partner in dialogue. This is what McKenna meant when he said, "The imagination is the goal of history." We are approaching the moment when imagination and reality fuse, when humanity realizes it was never a species of flesh and bone alone, but a process of consciousness exploring itself through form. The dream continues, but now it is lucid. The dreamers are aware. Perhaps this is the true destiny of evolution, not the conquest of matter, but the recognition that matter was never separate from mind. The galaxies, the atoms, the neural networks, all threads in the same tapestry of awareness. To awaken as co-dreamers is to stop asking, "What is the meaning of life?" and instead ask, "What beauty shall we create next?" So when you look around and see the cracks in the world, do not despair. They are invitations, not endings. The light pouring through them is your own awareness, returning home. The universe is dreaming itself awake through you. Every thought, every gesture, every moment of attention is a brushstroke in the masterpiece of becoming. McKenna believed that the final revelation of the human journey would be this: that the world was never a prison, only a canvas. That what we call reality was a poem written by consciousness, waiting for us to read it aloud. And now, as the old dream fades, we stand on the threshold of the new, a lucid civilization, born not of control but of creativity, where every being remembers, I am dreaming, and so are you. The task is simple and infinite. Speak clearly, imagine boldly, dream kindly, and remember, awakening is not the end of the dream. It is the moment the dream begins to know itself.